Thank you. Yes, I'm Chris Butler. I'm one of the founders and the CEO at OneModel. And what I'm going to show you through today is a few interesting things that we did with customers last year. Some out-of-the-box type applications of some of the infrastructure and tools that we've actually delivered to them. So, what we deliver our customers today is really a full end-to-end people analytics infrastructure. We're very good at how we orchestrate all of the data from each of the systems that are holding people data or business data that can provide context around people, how that comes together, how it's merged, and then how ultimately extracting value from that data as we go. So there's a couple use cases that I'm going to show you today. One around some of that actual data management and orchestration pieces, and on the far end applying some quite cutting edge machine learning tools for solving problems that we wouldn't have thought of before. So the product itself on that middle peer was around the presentation. You saw in George's presentation yesterday from Tabcorp a few other pieces that he had built himself. But really, what we're going to walk through is some of those edge cases that customers brought to us last year. So the first is really supporting some system migration and how we start to pick up new tools and innovation, and then a couple applications of using automated machine learning for drawing some more information from that data as we do so. All right, so the first one, a customer had come to us. So we're moving between systems, as you see, with Taleo and Workday at either end. And they really couldn't get access to a lot of that data, how they understood it, and asked us to come in and help in that process. And this was always for us a big use case for what we were ultimately developing for, because when you start to source data from these systems and you build these infrastructures as we do, you have a lot of knowledge about how these systems function, how they behave, what that data looks like, and it actually is not too far out along the path to then be able to help to facilitate a move from one system to another. So we had always built the ability to push. So in this process, we built a lot of the source understandings from Taleo, how we would model that into our analytics systems, provide data quality and validation in that process, and ultimately push that down into a Workday format that was ingested. And when you do that, it's virtually an infinitely repeatable process. You can make those updates and push it through and kind of change that as much as you want. Now, the reason I highlight this is, we spend so much money and time on systems and creating these understandings that I don't think we give enough importance to the value of that asset that we've actually built in the middle there. Once that data is connected and clean, there's so many more use cases that it can be used for. You'll see other people in the business kind of asking for this data. So making it available, allows you to use that asset in a larger sense. And I think what we'll see over the next, certainly over the next several years, is our attitude between, how we're managing some of this data and the technologies that we're using on the transactional side will become more disconnected. If you are able to move between systems much more rapidly, you have a much greater choice in which technology you're using and the ability to adopt that innovation faster. You don't need to worry about kind of the history of that data because it's then being held in a separate tool, and you can do this much faster. So that's going to be a trend and a change that I think we're going to see over time. Most organizations aren't thinking that way, but I would mention it to you. But as you are either buying or building these systems yourself, keep that in mind that it's going to be a bigger use case in the future that you'll deploy them for. Okay, so the next two pieces are really kind of an exploration of some of the OneAI tool sets that we've built. OneAI for us is the name for our automated machine learning product. It's designed to build predictive models very quickly for a customer, looking across every single piece of data that we hold for them. So it will consume everything we know about that organization, which might be several dozen to several hundred systems that we're actually feeding through here, build multiple different machine learning predictive models and really assess them against each other to find the right one that fits. Okay, so hugely powerful. It's allowed us to very quickly kind of roll out predictive models for customers, add new data sets, and not have to worry about the intricacies and the time that a data scientist would need to really wade through all of that data to make different decisions. The machine's able to make those decisions and automate that on your behalf. So as we push that out, we're explaining exactly what that machine is doing, why it's making decisions, what it sees in that data, and the application of that and the information that it's generating has been pretty useful for other areas. So, one of our customers came to us with a recent engagement survey. They weren't getting as much information as they thought they were going to. They were kind of stuck with what they were seeing in those results. So we basically plugged it into the OneAI product. You can see here that we've targeted it to predict an engagement score. We didn't actually use this for predicting somebody's engagement, but we're giving it a target for what it was to look like. So it's gone through and built an EDA report, giving a whole bunch of information that I'll show you around some of that data, and ultimately a modeling report that we would use to understand what's being selected at the end of the day. But in that EDA, and this is really why we did it for them, we're providing a whole bunch of more statistical information around what it saw those answers were doing across the different populations that we're answering. So there is this question here on it would take a lot for me to leave the business. We can see in the chart over on the right-hand side, that blue line there is our lesser engaged population, and the green bars are our highly engaged populations. So they couldn't see a lot of this breakout, and applying it to something like this, the blue bars make sense. They're scoring low on the scale there. But what was interesting is our highly engaged population was still answering this question quite broadly and even towards the lower end of the scale here. And it was something that they hadn't seen. So our engaged people still would not take a lot for them to leave the organization, which was something new and interesting to them. And doing this on every single question they literally spent weeks kind of trolling through and looking for nuggets as they started to do this. So, a use of some of the outputs of machine learning, not in a predictive sense, but really to start describing what's going on in that data. All right, so the second piece, basically what we called it was a just-in-time workforce planning method, so not strategic. The company we did this with had grown quite rapidly over the years. They'd hit a bit of a limit and the brakes were put on, and basically they were told that they had to keep a steady state headcount. And they were quite strict about how they were doing that. So the challenge that the team had was they could only open up enough requisitions to stay there. They couldn't go above, they couldn't go below, and came to us for help in identifying what that was, because they were making these decisions on a weekly basis, which is why we call it just in time. All right, so ultimately what we had to do to find out what that was is predict how many people were going to leave, and how many requisitions were we going to fill that were already open to get what that difference was. Now that's might on the surface level seem innocuous, but it's pretty difficult in overall terms to be able to get on a weekly basis just how many recs were opening. And what it meant was that we had to create many models to be able to answer those questions. So on our attrition question, the overall numbers of how many were going to leave we needed to know. But as a factor into that, a person's individual risk gets folded in as a feature as well to identify whether there's going to be significant changes in what that prediction was. At the back end on requisitions, how long are the ones that we've got open going to take to fill? If we open a new one, how long is that going to take to fill? Multiple different models coming together to generate really one number at the end of the day. So in order to answer that, how many requisitions did we open this week? We had to build 5 different predictive models for each significant department or region, and they had to run on a weekly basis. So 50 different predictive models that could be changing as the behaviours of the workforce change, needed to be orchestrated and run through this tool set. And that's one of the, the big reasons why we built, virtually a platform for doing that, is once you get to that level of scale of application, just the orchestration of doing that is mind-numbing. You would have data scientists kind of working full-time, 24 hours a day to try to get to that level. But ultimately, this hugely important for them. They describe it as the most single important thing that they had going on, and what they could take to the business in each department and region was, this is the number of requisitions that you can open this week, ultimately. Okay, so yeah, some interesting use cases. We're core around data, but we're now, definitely in a value extraction type phase. So if anyone's interested, happy to chat.
All right, thanks, Chris.